Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for a new episode of A New Go of New Home Sales. I'm your host, Anya Chrysanthon, and joining me today is Gary Stein. Gary is the Chief Marketing Officer at Virtuo. Welcome to the show, Gary. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Same here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on.
So before we kick things off, I would love for our listeners to get a little bit of a backstory on who you are. Everybody seems to have a very unique way of getting into the home building industry, quote unquote. So tell us your life story. How did you end up here?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I guess everybody's taken an unusual path, and I am no different. I have been full-time with Virtuo for just about a year now, a little bit more. Before that, I was an advisor to the company, and I've known the founders all the way back to when they just had a crazy idea and sitting in their living room, and that's where I met them. Most of my career I have spent at advertising agencies. I have worked at a couple different places, a few great big global networks, and a couple independent shops, and doing all kinds of advertising strategy for lots of different companies, including great big companies like Google Cloud or Coca-Cola, and did some work with Oakley and some fast moving startups as well. And always trying to think about how do we take a message and make it so everybody is excited and attracted towards it. I've had a couple through my career. I had a few companies that were in the home services business, one of which was actually a window manufacturer. We did some really breakthrough work with them. And the opportunity just came along to focus in. Like I said, I've known the founders of Virtuo for a long time, and I've always really liked what they're doing, their consumer-centric approach, thinking about the home owner and what that person is looking for, and really trying to build something kind of unique and breakthroughs. Made the decision to hop on over and join, as we would call it, the client side. And then if you spin the clock way back, I got a master's degree in American literature because all I ever wanted to do was read books.
Oh, how cool. So have you ever thought about writing a book?
I think I am a better reader of books. I actually, this is spinning the clock, not quite as far back. I did co-author a book about communications, and I've always done a lot of writing. I enjoy writing.
Mhm.
Books themselves, I'm really impressed by people who can sit down and write 500 pages. It's such a unique skill to pull that story all the way through. It is not the thing for me, but I'm
Hey,
always
never
interested
say
in
never.
reading.
You never know. One day,
That's true. That's
now with
true.
AI is a ghostwriter. You could do it. Anybody can do it now.
That is
So,
right.
Gary, what's your all-time favorite book and what are you reading now?
Okay, so my all-time favorite book is probably The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. It's a novel that I've read at least three times. I find it a beautiful moment, a capture of a piece of history and the characters that are in there. The book that I am currently reading is actually a collection of essays by an historian named Jill Lepore, who I like quite a bit. And so she just released a book of essays, some of which I've read in the past, but that's the one on my nightstand.
Very cool. So you appreciate the historical literature.
I do, yeah, definitely. It is always, I don't know, I get fascinated trying to figure out where we are now. And I think the best way to understand where we are now is to start looking backwards. And I just keep on going backwards and trying to find those connecting points along the way.
Very cool. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about Virtuo and what do you guys do there?
Yeah. So we are first and foremost a consumer experience company, a customer experience company. And the primary offering that we've got is we help people move into their new homes. So somebody buys a house and they are as excited as they have ever been. And then they have to do the worst thing ever, which is to move all of their stuff. We provide a concierge platform and an app and a very sophisticated service that makes it totally seamless. One of the things we've been saying is we make moving the stresslessness thing you've ever done. And generally, what we do is we work with builders who then buy our service and provide it as a added benefit at no cost to the home buyer. And what that ends up doing is improving the customer experience. It takes a stress part and removes it from people's minds. It creates an experience that is very satisfying, and builders get to see increases in satisfaction scores, in referrals. It becomes a real shining star. We love working with builders who are promising a great experience, and we become one of the ways that they help deliver that. So that's really where we're focused right now. Obviously, we're thinking about the entire homeowner experience and how to make that better and better for everyone as much as we possibly can.
Very cool. So today we're really going to jump in and talk about how can home builders provide the best possible customer experience. And since I have the Chief Marketing Officer on the podcast, I would
Yeah.
love to also dive into some marketing questions and what's working today with the home buyer, and obviously the psychology you mentioned, customer centric. So
Mm,
we'll get into that in a little bit. But before we do, a couple of follow-up questions for Virtuo. So
yeah.
when you say you make the moving stress-free, what does it
Yeah.
entail? So what's included in that concierge service, if you can break it down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that it usually works is once somebody buys a home, and obviously we're working most frequently, not exclusively, but often with new home construction, someone will make a commitment and they will, start picking their lot and the finishes and all of the details around their home. We'll get a referral back of that customer. Our concierge team will reach out and call them and engage and understand what it is that they need to do in order to move. Some people are upsizing, some people are downsizing, some people are moving across the country. Some people have a car that they need. We actually had someone who had a specific pet that needed to be taken care of in a certain kind of a way. Everyone's move is different. So we do an intake and understand what all of those needs are. And then we just start setting things up for people. So the mover itself is a key one. And then getting your utilities switched over. Sometimes people will need a realtor because they're selling their existing home. There's everything all the way down to the mail keys and the bins that need to be set up to get in. Plus, as well, there's documents and legal fees and all of those details. Our concierge, they will meet their concierge. That concierge will be on call for them. They can talk with them however they like, whether it's through chat or a phone call or text. They'll download our app and then everything starts getting communicated through the app. For example, if the mover is going to come and do a walkthrough on a certain day, that will show up on their calendar, which will be, again, in the app. All of the documents will be held in the app. There'll be special offers that they can take advantage of, really just making it as absolutely simple and seamless as possible, every element of it.
I think anybody who's ever moved in their life can definitely attest that it's typically one of the most stressful situations. So I'm sure the consumers appreciate that. So talk to me
Yeah.
about some of the home builders who are using the service, and how are they advertising that service? And do you think that is there a correlation between really that customer satisfaction at the end of the day? I'm sure a lot of builders measure that with
Yeah,
surveys,
absolutely.
et cetera.
Yeah, definitely. So our current customers are the accounts that we work with, the ones who have been most successful. They make a promise out to the marketplace. And we talk about brands. There's a million different ways of defining what a brand is. My favorite one is just that's the promise that you're making to the customer. It's going to help you run faster or smell better or whatever it might be. That's the promise that we're making. And of course, there has to be a reason to believe that promise. It's going to help you run faster because it's got lightweight laces for a shoe. I'm making something up, right? So, what really we've seen work best is when we connect with a company, a home builder out there that's making a promise that says something like, so it's just a building with a bedroom and a bathroom. This is your home. This is where you're going to raise your kids. This is where you're going to be really proud to have your friends over. You're going to pick the Christmas. Like, this is where you're going to come home to at the end of the day. Really understanding that it's a huge purchase and it's a very valuable purchase, but it's an incredibly emotional and important one. And the home builder wants to make sure that the buyer gets that. And then so they'll make that promise. And then the buyer will say, okay, yeah, but what does that mean? And then we really like it. I really like, as much as I love our brand and as strong as we built our brand, I like it when we are a supporting point. We're like the supporting actor in the film, not the star. It'd be great if somebody said, you know what, I'm like, my first choice is the move concierge when I buy a house. No, they're going to choose the home and the neighborhood and the builder. Then they say, how are you going to take care of me? How are you going to make sure that my experience is great? And they might list a few different things. Maybe the design center is really very innovative and creative. And also, we're going to make sure your move to this dream home that you've chosen is not only not terrible, but actually great. So if we say, I'm kind of leaning into it, right, where it's just what's marketing's making a promise that's interesting and compelling, and then supported by a reason to believe, when we're a reason to believe, it works really well.
Yeah, I think for most home builders, the experience always starts off on the high note, right? The
Yeah,
buyer's excited, they come in, they're like, yes, we get to choose this new home. And hopefully a lot of builders are starting to utilize a lot of visual aids. Inugo provides a lot of that
of
to help
course.
home buyers really eliminate the overwhelm and make the choices as easy as possible. But then as construction progresses, we tend to see cold feet and we tend to see a lot of dissatisfaction starting to creep in because I think part of it is we're such a society of right now instant gratification that it's very difficult for somebody to wait for 6 months to a
Absolutely.
year for this promised home. And oftentimes builders really fail to communicate properly during this phase. And
Hmm.
by the time they're ready to close on the home, a lot of times they're not as happy as they should be. So
Yeah,
service like yours is certainly helping them stay more excited. And when you eliminate that burden at the end of the transaction, I'm sure their satisfaction is just going much higher. So I'd be curious to know builders who use your service versus somebody who's not, what's the
mm.
difference in those satisfaction scores? Because there's got to be a noticeable difference in how the customer feels at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a bit tough to give an exact number on those things. I will say if you visit our website, we have a series of case studies. The best way for us to do it is to say, here's a builder who used us and saw their NPS or their Avid score go up, and specifically can tie that back to the service and support that they got that we were able to help provide. As much as I would say, hey, use us and you go up 20%, it's a little bit tough to quantify that. I think that's a lot of the story with CX in general is how do you make a connection back to the actual bottom line of it? What we have is a series of results that we've seen from builders who have really embraced this. And as you said, there is this gap, there is this long period of time that exists where people will have lots of thoughts and they'll have questions and concerns. And sometimes they're questions and concerns that the builder isn't necessarily in a position to answer. We help fill that gap. We help become a consistent voice and a consistent presence throughout that time. That's always on the side. We like to think of ourselves as the steadfast ally of the homeowner. They can always call us and they can always ask any number of questions. So we allow at least an interface, like a way of being connected to the process that they're going through in the builder all the way through. If you look at any consumer journey, there's always an emotional thing. It's like it goes up, and like you said, it goes down, and it swirls like this. And we always want to focus on when it's down. Virtuo can help to bolster that up in those moments, and that's really where we see the real satisfaction because the builders know that there is an extension of their team helping making sure that whole experience is really good.
Yes. So it's almost like when the buyer is starting to experience that doubt, and there are several points of doubt during the home buying process. For example, the doubt can be, is this the right builder for me? The first. The second one is, did I make right choices when I was
Yeah.
choosing the finishes and how it's going to look like? And then when construction doesn't take place for a while, when the builders are busy getting permits and nobody's communicating that to the buyer, they're like, oh, shoot, they took my money and now they're not actually working on it. So there are several of those points where holding somebody's hand through that process is so important to build that trust.
Absolutely.
Because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, if the customer feels like they can trust you, that is going to be the biggest indication of success. And at the end of the day, those happy customers, trusting customers are going to leave you the best possible review. So when builders try to communicate this message to their buyers, it's a
Yeah.
great way to really separate yourself from the other competition. And especially now as hopefully the interest rates are starting to come down, and we're starting to see the market heat up again. So the competition is going to get fierce.
That's
So
right.
let's talk about some of the best practices for letting consumers know about this service and maybe incorporating it into the builder's marketing message. What works right now?
Yeah, definitely. We work really closely. And I think this is the other thing is that builders are consistently looking, it's like anybody, we're consistently looking to differentiate themselves. They know a family or a person, whoever, is going to go and visit a bunch of different houses, maybe in the course of one single Sunday, and they all begin swirling together. So there's got to be like a thing that helps people remember this particular builder, right? And it doesn't have to be everything. There's this notion of creating a memory in someone's mind that's connected to the particular builder, right? So they may remember, I saw 4 beautiful kitchens, but that third one had that service, right? So how do we make sure that really starts to resonate? So there's 2 things that we do. One is we will be in the sales center of the show home in some way. And I use this word, which and here's like another little aside. This is a bit of a practice that I've pulled from my work in advertising is, can we take the benefit and can we phrase it in a memorable way? And so that's where we came up with this word stresslessness, which is not exactly, it's an invented word, but it's memorable. And we often say stresslessness est, which I've said 10,000 times, so I can say it easily. When people try to say it the first time, they stumble over it, right? So it's funny, so to speak. It's not hilariously funny, but the saying something is easy is difficult. It's difficult to say how easy it is. So we have assets. We've got a video that we've created. We've got a series of physical assets that are all about removing stress, because we know that moving is stressful. For example, we've got cards, like little postcards that say, you buy this home and you'll get the Virtuo service, and it's going to make moving so much easier and you don't have to stress about it. That card is scratch and sniff with lavender, because smelling lavender relaxes people. We also have tea bags, chamomile tea, small little things that are meant to be a bit unusual and funny, but communicate that value proposition. And they're always co-branded with the partner. And as a matter of fact, the best execution say, home builder brand is going to make your move simple, scratch and sniff lavender, powered by Virtuo, right? We play very back. So again, when they're at their home at the end of the day, or they go back to their, like, I look at those 4 different kitchens, they were all so beautiful. Oh, but this one had that fun lavender thing. And it just creates like a little bit of a memory and just something that kind of says, again, I'm going to get this thing, which is the move service, but I'm going to get this thing because this home builder is concerned about my experience and wants to make sure it's great. So when we structure things like that, it works well. And we can also have fun with it. We don't have to list all the features. Yeah, we've got an app and you can get your utility set up and, and all that stuff. Stresslessness is just a shorthand for all of that. And it's fun to say. And then we can follow up with them on emails and weave our way in. The other thing that I think that is really effective is making sure that we work closely with our partners' sales teams. So in a sense, again, they're not necessarily selling us, but they know, I'll tell this one kind of quick. They know that they have a tool to use to talk to somebody. So one of the things that we found out through working with some of our partners is that something like 2/3 of people walking in when they're buying a home are already thinking about the move. And the move is causing them friction. Matter of fact, there's a really wonderful study. I can post a link up to it that actually measured the degree to which stress goes up when people move. Moving increases people's stress levels 270%. And that heightened level lasts for 6 months, the 3 months before the move and the 3 months after the move. And I don't know if you've ever tried to make a decision when you're stressed, but it's terrible. You don't want to do it, especially if it's big and it's monumental. We want our accounts, our customers, our partners, sales teams to know if they're talking to somebody and if they see any kind of tension sale, you're probably worried about the move, right? And they bring that out. So helping even just that series, like what I just said, helping sales teams know, and it's a little bit of empathy, know what's going on in the head of the potential buyer and having a solution for it. and then say, now let's talk about your kitchen finishes, right? Like getting them through that point to get to a better conversation. So it's having that presence, having it be memorable, and training people to know when to talk about it and in what way.
I love that. So being memorable is huge because
Yeah.
I used to sell homes myself back in the day. And
Yeah.
especially in the last few years, it was like the sea of gray, right? Like you come back and you remember gray kitchen, gray everything,
Yeah.
white cabinets, like which one was that? And most shoppers had a hard time telling which builder was which. So yeah, anything you can do to be memorable, like Gary said, that is huge. And I do love what you do with your marketing. I had a chance to see it firsthand at Jeff Shore's summit
Oh,
last
yeah.
year with your amazing booth. Was it back to the don't get stuck in the past? There's
Exactly.
mood rings and all the fun tchotchkes. So I love all the little details that you thought
Yeah.
of that really connects, like you said, a lot of your senses to every time I think about you, about Virtuo, I always think about that great booth that you guys put together.
That's
So
awesome. Thank you.
speaking of that, let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about marketing. So since your
Yeah.
background
Hmm.
was working with agencies, as a CMO now, how do you decide which parts of your business you should do in-house versus worth outsourcing to an agency? So from your personal experience with the brands that you worked with, what works the best?
Yeah, definitely. I think in-house is definitely going to be any kind of demand generation. That really works best in-house. You can certainly hire experts who can do those sorts of things, but getting the machine running that is putting your brand out there and getting responses back, and then putting that into a sales cycle, that's really best done internally. The next thing is anytime you're going to do a campaign, and I suppose we're slightly different. Often you'll ask an agency to come up with a concept for the campaign. We tend to come up with them ourselves just because of the sort of people that we are. And actually our CEO, Casey, and one of the reasons why I work for him, he said to me, he goes, I want all of our marketing to either make people laugh or cry. And I'm like, I'm in, right? Like we're going to do both of those
Hey, it's all
things.
about emotions.
It is all
It's
about
great.
emotions. Exactly. So what we like doing is coming up with the concepts ourselves internally and then bringing in agencies to help us make them come to life. For example, and part of that I think is that you got to be very close to the customer, to the buyer to really get that insight that's going to hook them. Because we did that we made our booth and all of our presents look like it was from the 1970s. It was very outdated. That was
Retro, not
tied
outdated.
retro, exactly, exactly. And that was really tied to this insight after we talked to a lot of different builders. We keep on hearing the same thing, and hopefully we hear this and everyone hears this in like the positive way, is that there's this feeling that the industry marketing or so many markets and so many companies are so far in the future where builders tend to be slower moving. They're not the most progressive types of companies. If you think about whatever, like an online service or something like that, but they
Right.
really
And
want to
even like
be
often they compare us to the
automotive.
automotive
Exactly.
industry is so much further ahead as far as technology, the marketing, just the online experience versus what we see with home builders. So yeah, I get it.
That's right. And it's the same thing for the products that you all are selling, the services that you're providing with Nugo. It's a very modern approach. And so we see ourselves, even just to focus on customer experience, as a very modern approach to business. And so we kept on hearing that they want to be modern, but they feel like they're slower, they're not as progressive. So we listen to that and we say, okay, let's tell a story about that, which is don't get stuck in the past. And the visual on that was using these interiors from homes that were very much from the 70s, avocado cabinet kitchens and conversation pits and lots of paneling. And it said, you don't design kitchens that look like this, or your kitchens don't look like this anymore. What about your customer experience? And try to make that leap with people. And so it was meant to be something like, we know what's in your mind. Let's poke at that a little bit in a fun way to get you to just come. And then if we have 10 seconds to explain what it is we do, that's a great marketing win for us. So anyway, long story short, when we came to that kind of conclusion, we had the idea of let's have fun with these interiors. We brought in an agency, a great group that is based here in San Francisco called Agency SOS. They helped us turn that idea into a real campaign, meaning they did the visuals for us. They helped us with the tagline. They helped us with create a 30-second spot. Just take something that was a little free floating and make it into a workable piece for us. That's where we were really able to leverage the agency. And by the way, Agency SOS is run by a guy named John, who I've known for years, who's a great ad guy. He and I have worked on projects together, so it was very easy for us to pick up and start collaborating from there.
Very cool. What about something like PR? And again, I don't want to go down the
Yeah,
rabbit hole.
no, totally.
Do you
Yeah,
think?
no, absolutely. PR is great. PR is great to bring an agency on for. We have recently brought on a PR agency, and it's one of those things where PR is a skill for sure. How do you phrase a message in a way that reporters are interested? But it's also having the knowledge and the insight and the connections so that our PR agency has a relationship already with reporters. So I could certainly call that reporter up, but good luck. I'm not going to get my phone. They're not going to answer my phone call, but they're friends with this other person. They built those relationships. So that's one of those things where finding a PR agency, it's not, and the tough thing about it is it can be somewhat expensive. It can be extremely expensive. It's one of the things where it's kind of anything. But PR, of course, it's a little bit tough to measure the results on it. You can say, we got mentioned this many times and somebody called us, but making those connections between those two things, that's where it gets a little bit tough. But I think that's another reason to do an agency. Also, PR is one of those things that consistency helps. Can always be putting out a press release, always be putting a story out, always be calling these reporters. You get into the routine of it. That's something an agency can really focus on just because they have the resources and the time to do it.
Absolutely. So since you mentioned customer-centric
Yeah,
marketing and customer-centric approach, and I'm sure the builders that you partner with have to be customer-centric in order to actually even consider service like that.
yeah,
So for a home builder who is thinking about separating themselves from the rest and creating more of a customer-centric experience throughout the
yeah,
whole home buying process, obviously, aside from hiring you guys, can you
yeah.
talk about some of the best practices that you've seen some of your builders utilize throughout the sales and marketing process that really says, hey, we're customer first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things that are worth doing. First of all, recognizing that customer centric or human centered design, it's a different sort of an approach to the business. Where I think that a more traditional way is build a product and tell everybody about it and let it go, let them buy it and use it. Human centered design or a customer centric approach starts not with the product that you're building, but with the person and what their needs are. They want something to occur. And the best thing to do, the best practice on this one is to develop a set of personas and the journeys. And it sometimes feels like it's a bit of a whiteboarding exercise and what are we doing? And this is so much detail. But that process, and there's facilitators that can help with that. You can watch a YouTube video on how to do it. There's manuals, there's templates, there's definitely ways of approaching it. But essentially, what you do is just say, who are the people that we're going to be talking to? And I think this is incredibly important for home builders because most likely the decision is being made by a few people. It's not just a single person who's saying, this is our house and everybody move in. It's the both members of the couple, or it's sometimes the kids, or sometimes it's the grandparents, or sometimes it's the aunts and uncles that all live around, or the best friends. It's a crowdsourced decision, right? And even though one person may sign it on the bottom line, you got to think about all of those people. So we do those personas where we just say, who's the primary decider? Maybe it's a couple. I'm just kind of thinking of a family right now. However, their kids are going to influence that. And then they're going to want to double check that with their best friends or with their employer, not get verification, just say, does this start to make sense? How do you feel about it? So we get each one of those personas, and then you think about who is the one who's going to be doing the actual decision making and map that out across a series of steps. And you can do this super detailed where it's like every single thing that they do. And that's awesome and valuable, but it also pretty resource intensive. The better, quicker way, just especially if a builder is thinking about starting this up and doesn't want to do a 6-month long research project, what we've done in the past is what we call moment mapping, which is not every single thing that the person does, but what are the key inflection moments? And what do those moments feel like? And are those moments really excited, really anxious, really nervous? What's the emotion that's on there? And then what is going to trigger the next moment? So the first moment might just be driving around neighborhoods, not actually even walking into anything, but just spending a day driving around. And then there's also the realization that the brand probably needs to just let that happen. The next moment is when they walk into your center, right? And how do we make sure that moment goes well? And there's a whole bunch of stuff between driving around and walking into your sales center we're just not going to worry too much about. We just want to make sure we understand that moment. And it creates this really good focus. And then the thing is, once you identify that moment and the emotion around that moment and what will turn it into the next moment, which is going to the design center or whatever it might be, then everybody in the company thinks about how do they contribute to making that moment go well. So, for example, we might say walking into the show home is a moment that we consider valuable. People are excited, but they got a little trepidation. Is this one the right one? Like you said, can I afford it? Is it really as nice? So they're a little cautious. We want them to feel excited. That's a moment where the transformation that happens, the turn that happens is, this is a thing I'm looking at to, I can picture myself here, which I think with anything is not just, do I like those shoes, but do I see myself wearing those shoes? This is a totally side thing. There's a hat brand. They make like
You've got the shoes. What are the shoes and shoelaces?
I know, right? There's a so this is I'm gonna go to the top to the hat, right? There's a hat brand called Gorin Brothers. They're located everywhere. They make nice like fedoras and things like that. And literally on their homepage, it says you can pull off a hat, right? Which is and their hats are not cheap. They're like $300 hats, right? And there's a lot of people who are thinking like, oh, it'd be cool to wear a Indiana Jones hat, but I look like an idiot. I can't wear that. That's not my style. They totally get it. And so they're saying, you can picture yourself in this moment. I think that's the same thing that could happen in that first moment in the show home. It's like, you can picture yourself here. Mm-hmm. Okay, if it's you can picture yourself here, the salesperson, but the construction person and the interior designer and everybody can contribute to making that moment go from cautious optimism to, I can see myself here. And that's how we start being customer centric, right? And of those moments, there's going to be 6 moments, and there's going to be everybody. At some point, a Nugo is going to have a role in that. Virtuo is going to have a role in that. Who all of your other partners, the concrete guy is going to have a role there. Everyone has that role in making that moment be great and value generating. And so people and the moments and what we want to have happen in each one of those moments and what everybody can do to make that moment happen is the fast track to consumer centric. And that's essentially how human centered design works as well.
I love that. So you just gave a whole lecture on that. And I love the idea of moment mapping. So as builders, it's such a gamble that they take with even building a model home and decorating the model home, merchandising the model home. And it's like they pray and hope that they pick that right persona. So, I would encourage you guys all to make sure that you are spending a little bit more time on mapping those moments and really identifying who is that person, because that is probably going to be the most important thing that you can get right. Because as long as you get that right, everything else is going to be much easier. Yeah, that a little homework for you guys. Gary, as we wrap up things for today, is there anything that I didn't ask you or we didn't talk about that you think is important for our listeners to know?
I'm going to give I've had a really great opportunity to do some mentoring with people who are getting into the advertising world. And so advertising world is something that I happen to have spent a lot of time doing. And I always try to give one little bit of advice, because as you're out there talking to people and you're having these experiences, you're communicating, who knows what you're going to do. There's all sorts of different ways of doing it. And can I share my one piece of advice about what advertising should be? Okay, advertising, it has to be the 3 M's. It has to be meaningful, memorable, and motivating. So meaningful meaning it's got to communicate an idea about what your product is, and it's got to be relevant. Memorable, that's coming up with a funny word, or and unfortunately, a lot of advertising goes bad because they focus on memorable. Hey, let's shoot a squirrel out of a cannon, but it's not. It doesn't mean anything. And the last thing, motivating. It has to get somebody to take an action. And if it has all three of those things, then it's an ad. It can't be an ad, meaning an ad is some piece of communication that's meant to generate business value. If it doesn't have those three things, it's just not an ad. It's decoration or a piece of entertainment or just filling people's time. So if you're ever in a moment where you're being asked to evaluate an ad, and even besides whether or not you think it's well done or it's funny or it's clever, just say, does it have those three things? And if it's got those three things, then you're in the right space.
It got me thinking about the ad that I
Yeah.
saw recently on YouTube. It was for BMW, and
Okay.
I forgot which BMW, but it was like the low to the ground car.
Yeah.
And the the thing was that the driver is sitting at the crosswalk and it's the beach. So there's a bunch of people walking across and he can see the bodies, but he can't see their heads because he's sitting so low. And he's checking out this chick who's walking with like big shoulder bag. And then when she's passed, he looks out the window and he can actually see the face and it's a dude.
Ah,
And the thing was like, is it too low? So
yeah,
for the
totally.
car lovers, like that totally, it was such a funny moment. And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
wow, what a great, memorable ad. So that would definitely resonate with people. So I just thought that came
No,
up.
that's great.
So
Yeah, no, and you could tell that as a little story, right? A story is a character and a situation, and there's some sort of a conflict of all the rest of that stuff. It's like it's not a huge story. It's not Star Wars. It's just a small story about and you walk away with a notion: is my car too low? Oh, maybe I should get the X series, right? Whatever it might be
right,
from
right, right.
BMW. It's just that's a well done. I haven't seen the ad, but that's just a well constructed because it's a little bit of a memorable thing, and it's a funny moment, but it's a funny moment that says something about the product. That's always the key thing. And it's hard to
Especially in
do.
home building, we have such an opportunity to create, like you said, your CEO wants to see people either cry or laugh. And I think that is spot on for the emotions that we can get people to feel when they think about our brand for home building.
That's right. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things. It's like it's a tough exercise, but finding one particular thing about the way in which you build homes. Maybe it's the location. Maybe it's I don't know.
Maybe it's the
Yeah,
customer experience
it could be
because
the
they
customer
all work
experience,
with
right?
you guys.
And then tell a small little story about that going really well. That's what locks into people's brains, and it starts to make them realize, oh, this is a little bit different, right? This is the company that's going to help me move, right? And I understand a little bit about how that is. So that's part of the challenge. That's actually why I've always loved this, because it's really hard to do and it's very elusive, but you can just get it right. It's really satisfying.
Gary, if somebody wants to learn more about Virtuo and how to partner with you guys, what's the best
Yep.
way? Where do they go? How do they find you?
Yeah, www.virtuo.com is probably the best way to do it. And you're also welcome to look me up on LinkedIn and shoot me a message and get in touch. We'd love to talk to you about what we do, as well as if you just want to chat about customer experience. We're nerds about it. So we always welcome people to just have a chat about that as well.
And especially in this market, it's such a great opportunity to set yourself apart with customer experience. So guys, check
Indeed.
out Virtuo and give Gary a shout out, Gary Stein on LinkedIn. I'll be sure to link his profile in the show notes. So Gary, thank you so much for being on today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I always love talking with marketing gurus. It's just interesting for me how you think. And again, seeing some of the campaigns that you put together, I was really excited for that. And I just think it's such a great opportunity for builders to add value to their customers by making their life easier and providing that great customer service. So you guys check out Virtuo, and thank you so much for being here. And are you going to be at IBS, or will we see you there?
Most likely we will be there somehow. So reach out to us and we will find some time to hang out in Las Vegas.
Awesome. If not, then hopefully Jeff Shores
That's right.
in Nashville, I think, is this year again. So
Again in Nashville. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for
yeah.
having me on. This was great. I had a lot of fun.
Well, thank you, Gary. I'll talk to you very soon.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.